Okay. So I thought of having this call and explaining whatever I know. Don't think that I'm an expert, okay, and don't give me those questions that I even Einstein can solve. So help me there. But no, obviously, but stop me. Jokes apart, stop me and let me know if you have any question. I'll definitely try to help. And if I do not know, I will go back and look for it and let you know. Okay. So many of you probably have idea of what is cloud, but I'll still reiterate because there are new people who haven't worked on cloud in this meeting yet. So please bear with me for some time. Um, so before cloud, I want to tell you the importance of cloud, but for that I have to tell you what we used to have before that, though this time is pretty long ago and not very recent because cloud started quite some time ago. Now you can see this. This is a data center, which means that most of the big companies and even medium companies and some of the small scaled companies, they have or they used to have huge data centers where there were many, in number of racks and system and cluster and nodes and everything. So I wanted to paste this picture so you guys have some understanding that how difficult it used to be to maintain all this. I will name few of the things that were supposed to be maintained by the company, by the employees, by the organization. uh, Let me start with the building itself. You can see how huge this building is. So they had to, pay the rent um every month. Now comes the electricity part of it. Huge electricity bill, internet bill, cleaning staff, physical security, your data security, network security, um, software cost, software licensing, hardware, network engineers, and I can go on. I think I'll take the whole day and it won't end. So just think or guess the amount of hard work and the manageability it takes. From there, this kind of this thought started eventually, that why don't we have someone to take care of all this, and we, as in we, the organization or the employees, will only take care of the application or the data or whatsoever we need, but not this entire hassle of this huge data center. If I go to the next one, what is cloud? Cloud is nothing but a software. It is exactly as same as a database that you use, or a server that you use, or a desktop software that you install. So it may look exactly like that, but it can be, or rather it is actually a lot more than that in the background. But you think it as a software. You open a browser, you can go to the console of AWS, GCP, or Azure. These are the cloud providers name, the famous ones, the popular ones. And at the background or in the background, they are kind of taking care of all these things. So I'm not going much deep into this, right? Now, what is the benefit? You can read through cost saving. I will probably just talk or emphasize about couple of points and not go through each of them, because you guys can right now understand what they are. Cost saving, obviously, there are services in cloud which you need, which you use only when you need it. So obviously you will not need 100 of your machines every time. So maybe you need some machines in summer, some in winter. But if you are in a data center kind of a model, you always need to keep those machines with you. You cannot give it to someone, rent it someone or something like that. In case of cloud, you need only 50 machines at summer, you can use them and pay only for that. Security, these are very important, that's why I'm kind of talking about it. Cloud kind of takes care of the entire infrastructure security. Whatever service you choose, underline that whatever is there, the security is cloud's responsibility. If I'm talking about mobility, in case of physical data centers infrastructure, always there is a problem of mobility. If there you are going to some other country, some other continent, you have to think, you have to move your data center or not, and those kind of things. um, Disaster recovery, if tsunami comes tomorrow, your data center is in Mumbai, everything will be down, right? Your application, your business will go down and you can't do anything. With cloud, you just let it be with cloud, and cloud takes care of it. You don't have to think about all those natural disasters, or connectivity loss, or for that matter corona. Okay. Deployment models, basic benefits and everything is kind of over now. I guess you people are facing network issues. How do we deploy in cloud? There is public cloud. Okay. Can anyone tell me what is a public cloud? Let's make it more interactive.
So basically, public cloud is something like the information, whatever you're storing on the cloud, right, on the server, that is accessible to public, general public, right? You're not making it private. I mean, it's not restricted to some organization.
Right.
That's a public cloud, right?
That is right. Yes. So whenever your cloud or your data center is in public network, okay, then it is called public cloud. What is private cloud?
On premise,
Yes. Yes.
VPN.
Yes. If I say technically,
Dedicated clouds, right? Dedicated ones.
yes, yes, that is right. If I say technically, then it would be in a private network. It can be your on-premise, it can be on public cloud as well. So there is a concept where you can have a private network inside your public cloud. That would ideally be called private cloud. And now when you're, yes.
Yeah, what is the example for public cloud? Like, which are you said public cloud? Any company or
AWS.
anyone? Okay.
AWS. Yes, I'll come. I have some examples. I'll show you. Okay. Now there comes hybrid cloud. You can kind of imagine from the image that it's a mixture of public cloud and private cloud. So whenever you have a combination,
Your
your
voice is
organization.
breaking.
Oh. Is it better now?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So whenever we have an offering, whenever we are hosting our application or data or whatsoever, in a combination of public and private cloud, then it is called hybrid cloud. Okay, don't get confused. It is as simple as that. This is very important. These are the cloud offerings. The cloud, the cloud, or I should not generalize it in a cloud way, but these are the service offerings. It can be on-premise, it can be cloud. Now, if you see this image, try to understand this. From the image, it should be pretty clear. On-premise is when your data, when your infrastructure is infrastructure you have to manage entirely, everything, starting from your network till your application or your function. These are generally your own data center, which you are not lending to someone else. Infrastructure as services, when you are till virtualization, where on top of where your VM or VDIs come, till virtualization, when some other vendor is taking care of it. Now remember that I'm not spatially or explicitly talking about cloud. It can be anything. You may have a vendor and can help you with till virtualization. Platform as a service, when you have till runtime, it is more like when I don't know if you have worked on Lambda or functions on cloud, but when you have so first you have a laptop. Let me give very simple example, and everything is installed, operating system is there, you have your Java installed, you want to run a Java program. So the shopkeeper gave you a machine. Okay, this is your machine, and you can run your Java program on top of it. You don't have to do anything else. Everything is top to bottom setup. In that case, you have to write your Java application. You have to write your you have to have your database, and you run it on top of it. Okay, clear? Now, software as a service. When everything is given to you, you just use it. Any app, any software which is installed on your system can be a software as a service. Now a small exercise for you guys, give me some examples for each of them. On premise, you already know. For IaaS, platform and software, come on.
Yeah, I mean,
So
hosting
software can be
any,
your office softwares, right? Office 365.
Yes, right.
Any software that is installed on our personal systems as well are softwares.
Right. A very good example can be your Gmail. You're not even installing it, you are just using it through browser. How about
Would this be considering license software as well? Means software as a service.
why not? Why not? If it's free, then it's Gmail. If you are paying for it, then some license or proprietary software.
Mhm.
How about platform?
Mm, AWS can be a platform.
Yes, yes. There is a lot of debate whether AWS or the cloud providers are platform as a service or infrastructure as a service. But I personally believe that at a time, at some time, it can be a PS. At some time, it can be infrastructure as a service. But OpenShift can be a very good example of it. How about infrastructure?
Operating system. No.
No, no.
No.
Operating system is a part of it.
this, I mean, this can be, I mean, any organization can take, have AWS or Azure or anything. Uh, can
Git
have
maybe.
Virtual
and can
desktop.
run their own.
Hmm,
I
hmm.
mean, can run their own applications as well.
Yes.
VMs.
Maybe Git or Jenkins can be infrastructure as a service.
Git or Jenkins would be software as a service. Git
Okay.
Git Cloud can be infrastructure. Sorry, Git Cloud can be. That is also a software as a service because everything is provided. You just need to host your code. VMs are a very good example of infrastructure as a service. However, all the cloud providers are generally is an example of infrastructure as a service. Though I have, as I said, I have some debate, and not me. A lot of people have some debate on that. Okay. So yes, you can see some of the examples, but you already gave some examples. Okay. These are some of the facts. I'm audible, right? I'm not.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. 90% of the companies are on the cloud. Here, I'm not saying that they are completely on cloud and then don't have any on-premise. They can be mixed. They can be completely on cloud. Okay. By 2021, cloud data centers will process 95, 94% of the workloads, entire world's, workload. Okay. Race talks about, you know, the billing and everything, revenues. Top three providers, I think you guys are already aware: AWS, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform. Okay. This is a chart. It can be a little old. However, AWS is kind of, you know, leading this entire group of cloud providers. Then Azure, then GCP, VMware, IBM, Oracle, Alibaba. This comes in the, you know, top lot. Okay. Now I'm, you know, talking about, I'm going into a little bit, you know, generalized way. I will start talking about AWS. However, this slide talks about more or less on generic topic. And I will try to explain the region and the availability zone, concentrate, or you may get lost. Okay, now think about your regions where your data centers are concentrated. Okay, so if you want to host your uh, application or data, I'll mostly use these terms because most of you are from this background, you know, technology background or IT background. But from other backgrounds also, technology term is very generic. So wherever you're, okay, awesome, I got that 40-minute additional. Cool. So where you want to have your data or application. Now, how do I split my region? Region is a logical, you know, it doesn't really exist. Region is basically your geographical location. I will now give some example. You can say that I want to host my application in Asia region. Why? Because maximum of my clients or customers are from Asia. They can be from China, Japan, or India, something like that. Now, the whenever I'm using AWS, I'll start giving example of AWS now because we're entering AWS. I'll be selecting AWS specific regions. AWS has, for example, okay, I may not remember all the region names that is AWS has, so bear with me. AWS may have a Asia region. I want to select that. I'll go for that. And in there, I will have different availability zones. What does availability zone means? It is nothing but a data center. So the example, the picture that I have, A is a data center, B is a data center, C is a data center. Data centers, I just talked about in the first slide. Data centers are nothing but that huge, you know, building with a lot of racks and computers and everything. What you used to have in on-premise, cloud will also have that because that is the very basic unit of cloud computing, and it is not something different altogether than on-premise. So cloud will be hosting those data centers as well. The only difference is that they will be architecting those data centers in a very intelligent way so that your availability of application or data is intact. Why am I saying that? Now I'll give you an example. Say your application is, you have chosen 3 data center. One is in India, Mumbai, one is in China, one is in Japan. You have deployed your application only in Mumbai and you're happy, everything is going good. Suddenly the tsunami that I was talking about destroyed the Mumbai data center and your business is gone, you're doomed. When you're using cloud, you can select multiple data centers, which means multiple availability zones. That is why they are named availability zone, and multiple regions also. So if some problem comes into your Asia region and the entire Asia region is down due to network outage, you can also have your data or application in some other region, maybe in Africa region, and can host it from there. Maybe the throughput or the latency can be a little less. The customers may, face some slowness issues, but your application is not down and your business is not doomed. I hope I'm clear on the region and availability zone part. Do you have any question?
No, it's good.
Okay. Okay, I'm finally entering AWS IAM. Security is extremely important in cloud. A lot of times there is a lot of debate going on outside that whether cloud is good for security, whether on-premise is good for security. A lot of fintech and other companies, insurance, banking, hospital, those companies, organizations, data are extremely valuable, sensitive, and vulnerable. If anything happens to that data, the entire business is gone. And this is a fact that if you are choosing shared services means when you are trying to pay less and using a rack which is just next to some other company's rack. If you want some exclusive services, hardwares and everything, then you can go for a complete separate security intact rack or computer service or something else. But if you're using a little cheap services, then you are using shared hardware or software. In that case, there is, though I haven't heard of anything like that so far, but people of these companies are a bit scared of sharing this kind of data with maybe Bank of America's data is sitting next to Bank of Maharashtra. And though the possibility is very less of my example, but obviously Bank of Maharashtra won't want to happen that kind of friendship with Bank of America or Bank of China for that matter. But anyway, that was the important thing I wanted to bring up, so you have that idea. But there the security is very good unless you do explicitly something garbad. I don't see a very huge possibility of any security breach or any vulnerability. Now, this is a very important thing. IAM, Identity and Access Management, it sort of takes care of your entire authentication and authorization. These two terms are very important. Authentication means when you are kind of accessing something, and authorization is when what kind of role you have to perform certain actions. So these are the four pillars in IAM: users, groups, roles, policies. So you create an AWS account. You are an user. You can be a part of a group. Your group can have policies. Your group can have roles. Your user can have a role or a policy separately. So I'll give an example. So for example, you have a database admin group, and I myself, Supradeep, is joining the organization. A new user will be created with my name, and I will be added into the database administrator group because I'm a database admin. And different roles and policies will be attached to my group. If I am a user who doesn't have a group, maybe I am a maybe a niche skill like something, maybe RPA, and I don't have any other team member in the organization. So I alone will be managing all the RPA services in AWS. I'll not be a part of a group. It can happen. Ideally, it will not, because there will be a group. But a user may also have roles to manage the RPA services and the policies. Now, policies and roles are two different things. It may sound similar. Roles are majorly what permissions you have, whereas policies are a bit, you know, you have to go a little, you have to dig a bit deep down to understand the policies. It is basically when a user or a service is given a particular permission or what should I say, authorization to perform certain task. So your, I'll give an example, don't get confused. Your application can write data into database, right? But it is not that easy. You need to understand, uh, not always, you know, this kind of things happen. Maybe we are not aware, but you need to explicitly give that permission to your application so it can write some data to your database. Here, rather there, the policies come in picture. So you can, you know, write a policy, you can select a policy where you can mention that this is my application or this is my server, will be using this policy to write some data into my database. Okay, any questions so far? Could you understand?
No, Supradeep, it's good.
Okay. Okay, now I am entering the networking part. It can be a bit overwhelming. I'll try to, okay, I'll try to explain it with, okay, I don't know why I'm going forward. Um, I'll explain the network concept a bit, otherwise it will be difficult. It is a difficult part of, you know, when I studied it, I think I took almost 2 to 3 weeks to understand the entire concept. So there is public network. Think about the computer, the laptop, the hubs, the firewall, the gateways, all these things as a uh, as an asset, an asset of network or your entire infrastructure. Those are your assets. Now, when these assets are exposed in public network, which means that anyone can access your assets without any protocol, without any particular I mean, obviously there would be an IP address, without any particular restriction, then those things are in public network. And exactly opposite is private network, where that cannot be easily accessible, those assets, and you will explicitly write some rules so your external candidates or, you know, external assets, one, you know, one computer from outside world can access your computer. Majorly, you know, hackers would try to do that whenever they want, they see any compromised assets, IP addresses or anything else. So there comes this public and private subnet. If you can see my segregation, you can actually have your application, your systems, or whatever it can be, you know, database inside your public or private subnet based on the security requirement of your organization or of your work. VPC is virtual private cloud. This is basically the private cloud I was talking about in the second slide, if you remember the deployment models. So this is the private cloud that you can have inside of your public cloud. So you can see this is AWS, which is public cloud. Stop me guys if I'm not making sense, if I'm going too fast. This is VPC. This is a guard. Okay. Don't go too much. Don't go into too much technologies, technicalities rather. Just try to understand it from a basic, you know, understand very basic, generic, you know, understanding. So this is VPC. Whenever your external network is trying to access it, it has to go through gateway, internet gateway. There are several gateways that you can use where you have to write some rules. I just explained the difference between public and private network. Now, do not confuse between the public network and public subnet. Okay, public subnet is inside your VPC, private cloud. So this is also private, but there is some rules that you can make here which can be accessible from internet, outside internet. And your private subnet generally holds your applications and your databases, which you do not at all want to make public, not even public subnet, through public subnet. Okay, now let me
So
give,
we can say,
yes.
that, you know, the
Mhm.
public subnet may hold a web dispatcher kind of, a load balancer kind of thing. I
You
mean, it
can,
can be exposed to the.
Oh,
you can say that generally load balancers and others would be, you know, AWS service you have to access explicitly. But you kind of have your gateways, NAT gateways inside it. So I will, you know, explaining NAT gateways and other gateways, you know, those jump servers and everything will take me a day to explain. I will, let me give you some example. Okay, so think about your this VPC as a very secure society or a housing complex where internet gateway is a gate through which the outside publics are coming in. You know, maybe your Amazon guy came in and you want to send some parcel, and some of your relatives came in, they want to visit you. This, you know, uh, public private subnets are segregation of your houses, and houses are basically your computers or your application. So
Supratim,
yes,
yeah. Can you explain what is subnets?
subnet is a group of IP addresses.
Okay.
Okay, so you will have security guard sitting at internet gateway, and he will have a registry, and it is written there that only Amazon guys can enter. So that man will basically check with the guy with the ID, and he will check, okay, he's coming from Amazon, he will let him enter. So you basically write rules in your gateways. It can be an internet gateway, it can be a NAT gateway. Let me go to the next one. Okay, now with the example or the explanation I gave in my last slide, try to imagine, think that your application is in your private subnet inside, and through VPC NAT gateway. VPC NAT gateway is another level of security which is inside your society complex. Okay, so your Amazon guy is coming, he is passing through an internet gateway because, you know, internet is allowed or Amazon is allowed. He's coming, route table is just a list of, you know, route rules. That is, you know, these are all made of rules: gateway, internet gateway, route table, VPC, NAT gateway. So you basically have to, or the Amazon guy has to go through different gateways to reach to your application. Okay, just tell me.
So,
Yes,
so the route table will have basic guidelines like which availability zone the gateway will go to, right? Means
yes.
which. Okay,
Basically in route table you have IP addresses, you have ports, you have protocols mentioned.
okay.
Okay, so inbound and outbound rules are there, which means that अंदर से क्या बाहर जा सकता है and बाहर से क्या अंदर आ सकता है. Those rules are mentioned.
So, Supradeep, it is
Hmm.
basically kind of a fire flow setup between our private subnet and to the outer world, we can say.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And NAT gateways is a special kind of a gateway which can also talk to private and public network at the same time. That is why you need NAT gateways to talk to your private subnet. Yes, someone was asking
Mm.
something.
Yeah, private subnet is my machine. I can say, means where I'm accessing my applications and all.
Private subnet is where you are hosting your application or data.
Okay.
Okay. NAT gateway is also your machine. Everything is yours only. It is only the difference of configuration or the rules. Okay. Hope the concept is clear.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now, now I did not talk about the availability zone so far. Availability zone, I already told you that you can split your application into different availability zones. When you have your availability zones in, your application in 2 availability zones, if something happens, if a natural calamity hits your availability zone A, your B will still be available. Now, from this network topology, that concept should be very clear.
I mean, that is redundancy, right? I mean,
Yes.
the same application resides over
Yeah.
there
Yes.
in the two different. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. This was the most difficult one in it. Hope the rest will be easier than it. Okay, don't go by the name. So I just wanted to show you the other different endpoints and gateways and different ways of connecting. Okay, I'll not explain it, or you guys may do a PhD in networking. So your VPC can also talk to other VPCs. I told that different VPCs you can host your application in different VPCs in different regions also. So through VPC peering you can do that. Not necessarily always region, but across different availability zones and all.
I mean, what is the full form of VPC? I mean,
Virtual private cloud.
okay, that's a right.
This is just a logical separation, nothing else. Okay. Okay, finally networking is done. So far, any question, any confusion?
So just
No.
this segregation of VPCs, VPC NATs and availability zone, that will be totally based on logical routing, right? I
Yes.
mean, nothing technical as such in it, right? I mean,
Your availability zone is the physical outline, physical
yeah,
separation.
yeah.
Rest everything are logical.
Okay.
Okay. You can mention, though, in every place you have to mention your IP addresses and port numbers and everything. There are a lot of other details also. In that way, it is kind of physical also. You are kind of separating those machines into a different zone altogether.
Okay. Okay.
So it's a it's a concept wise it is logical separation, but it underline it's actually happening something based on the
Okay.
But just one question. I
Hmm.
mean, there can be, I mean, can there be multiple VPCs in one availability zone, or, I mean, shall be possible, right? Because it is I mean, it is a virtual separation. I mean, it is a logical.
Yes. Yes, just think that you can have your VPC in different availability zones. You can do that. This was the example, right?
Yeah, this was in different availability zone. I am saying that there can be, I mean, okay, I mean, this was a combination of two availability zone. I mean, if you see the virtual private VPC consisted of two availability zone.
Yes, VPC is anyway, it's a group of subnets, right? If you go
Yes.
to this one, right?
Hmm.
So whenever you are creating a VPC, you have to attach your subnets with it. And then you have to see where you place your subnets into which availability zones. That is how they are connected. Now you can have different, permutation combination, that kind of thing.
I think by default it's 5, right? That 5 VPCs that you can create per region. I think that's the default that AWS provides, right?
Yes, there are some
Yeah.
default numbers. I don't remember right now, but yes, you cannot go, n number of, for For some services you can go in number of stuff, but I think for VPC and subnets they have some numbering.
Right. So you need to request actually. If you need more than 5, you need to request that to the support team of AWS.
Yeah.
That's
Yes. You give money, they can do.
that's right. That's right.
Any more question on networking? Okay, sounds good. Okay. By the way, the services that I'm explaining, they are the core services of AWS, which means that when at the time of inception, AWS started with these services, and they have grown stronger and stronger eventually. So EC2 is one of them. EC2 is your elastic compute cloud. Just think as EC2 as your VDI or your virtual machine. Okay, it is okay. Yes, tell me. You have a question? You raised hand. Is that Munai? Okay, probably not. Uh, is there okay? Okay, there is okay. No, carry on. Okay. Um, okay. Elastic Compute Cloud. These are your servers. So you deploy your application in a server. You guys have deployed some application into Tomcat or WebSphere, and you have your servers, your clusters, your nodes, and everything. So this is your server machine, thing like that. Okay. Now, why it is not going to the next page? Okay. Um, Okay, now let me give you an example. It is a very, fun kind of a service, and it's very useful. I find it very good in terms of the usability, availability, and the manageability and everything. So now I'll give you a fun example. So you're maybe in New York, a guy, he's selling his toys for Christmas every year, and at the time of Christmas the sale is very high. A lot of consumers and customers, they come. He last year he saw in December that almost 40-50,000 customers visited his shop or his website to buy some stuff, and his servers were pretty less, and the number of requests were pretty high, so he couldn't manage. So immediately he bought around 500 servers. Again, uh, in the coming winter, he could see that everything went well, none of the requests were lost or something like that. But in summer, he noticed that only 5,000 or 10,000 people are coming, almost 50,000 less, 50% less requests, and he is kind of in debt, and he's thinking that what would I do with my rest of the servers, because the only 50% of my servers are in use. Then his brother kind of came and he said that I'm having the same business and I'm using AWS. Why are you on premise still? You have I do see you have a server server room where 500 servers or 5,000 servers are sitting idle. So he sold all his servers and he went to AWS, and he noticed that he has this opportunity of selecting or mentioning a threshold when a lot of requests are coming in. Based on that, he can tell AWS that okay, just double the number of my servers in winter in this specific time, and or he can just ignore the time. He can say whenever, maybe in summer also, if someone comes, a lot of requests come, you take care of it. I don't want to buy new servers, you take care of it internally. And he was surprised seeing that AWS kind of took care of it. And when the when that huge request went down, a lot of servers were automatically released, and he was not getting charged for it. So every time you use a server, you are getting charged. And he was finally very happy, and he was in profit, and he thanked his brother. I hope you got the moral of the story, where AWS EC2 kind of provides this opportunity or functionality where you do not have to, first of all, you do not have to physically maintain your servers. You can, AWS will take care of it, and it is available most of the time, or rather 99.999%. That is kind of the availability they provide. It is durable. You can replicate it anytime you want. You can, go up with the numbers of the servers based on your request. You can go down. Everything is going automatically. You just have to do some configuration, and for the rest of the year, you sit and enjoy your day.
So this need not be necessarily pre-configured, right? Means runtime also you can change it.
Runtime also you can change it, yes. So
Okay.
suppose you are seeing that a lot of requests are coming which you did not anticipate. You went and you changed the configuration, and it is taken care of. And you do not want to be it, dynamic at all. It's pretty static, maybe uh, out of, you're basically seeing very less number of requests. You do not need to make it dynamic. You just go and change it to 2 to 4 servers, and every time it is 4. I hope that is what you meant.
Yeah.
Okay. You can host your application EC2. You need to change your availability zone. You need to replicate your EC2 instances in different availability zones or in different regions. So if from India I want to buy, obviously if I have to reach to New York availability zone, then it is difficult because it will be little slow. Obviously I will not realize because our Indian network is anyway slow. But that seller wants to give me a good throughput, a good latency. He will select availability zone in Mumbai, and my whenever I'm accessing that toy, christmastoy.com or something, it's extremely fast. Okay. And in minute it can go global. Basically those configuration you change and you save, and you do not even have downtime. It will internally take care of it. That is the core essence of EC2. Now I will talk about the features, but let me talk about the instance types first. So here, if you look into these different types of instances, you will see that for different requirements, you have different instances. IOPS is basically for a huge input output kind of a operation, and input output is for database, we all know. So whenever you have a huge database, you want to do some big data kind of an operation, you have to go for I instance. So when you are selecting your VMs, you can select the instance types. When you are doing some gaming stuff, you can select P because it's good for graphics. And extreme memory, again big data kind of a work. A lot of data you are loading on memory at one time, and blah blah blah. Computer for computing, when you want to host your application, you choose C. For a little lesser kind of an application, when you don't need a lot of memory and CPU and everything, you go for T. By the way, if you choose the AWS free tier, then T2 is the free one. Okay. Now I'll talk about few of the features quickly. So you can choose these settings. You can see CPU, memory, storage. EBS is the storage, possibility or feature in, because you don't only choose a server, but you also have a attached storage, a hard disk, a network disk with it. because your application will provide or produce a lot of data on the runtime, and eventually you need to analyze them, or you need those logs for your future reference or error handling and blah 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 stuff. So it provides a very good amount of different variants of storage capacities. Those you can attach, you can detach, you can create backups of, and do several other things. Cool. Now there is AMI. What is AMI? It's a machine image. So the guy, so I am buying, go back to that example that I gave. So I am buying toy, from his website, and I want to make a similar business at my end, sitting in India, Pune. I told that guy, okay, please give me your image, whatever instance you have created. Because in that EC2 instance, he has to install all the softwares, host his application and everything. So getting that instance immediately would be better for me, rather, sitting for 10 days and installing Java and database and whatnot. So this guy can create a machine image for me, and he can sell it to me, or he can put it in marketplace for free, or with exchange of some money, or he can just share me with my user ID and I'll get it. And another thing, whenever you are creating a replica of your instance, this AMI kind of comes in picture. It is very fast when you have an AMI. You can quickly create another replica or another instance from it. Okay. Security groups are nothing but the different security levels and the rules that I was talking about in my previous networking slides. Again, there you can mention a lot of rules, so there isn't any hacker attacks or anything happens, any vulnerabilities or anything like that. I will not go too much into it. Okay, now the fourth very important service that AWS provides. This is simple storage service, or S3, where we basically save our objects, and objects are nothing but flat files. Okay, so don't get confused with the heavy names and everything with the images. So you save your flat file into some folder, that is S3. There is no limitation of the amount of data you are saving. There is no number of files that you can save. There is no limitation at all. But at a time, you can save a file of 5 TB. Okay. Use cases, whenever you are creating some build, the build will create a lot of jar, war files, and huge database backups and blah blah blah, whatnot. You would generally need S3 for that. If you are in a media company, or if you are in a some hospital managements, or some fintech or banking, they would have huge files with yearly data and everything. You guys can save the data in S3. Okay. Storage class. So based on the different storage classes or tiers, you can have your data saved. Standard are basically when you need your data very frequently, and these are the other different patterns when you can save your data and access it later. This is why it is, because you obviously would like to pay AWS less money. If you are sending it to S3 Glacier Deep Archive, you are supposed to access it in once in a while, maybe once in 6 months or once in 12 months. Okay, so based on that, the billing will be triggered based on your selection of your tier or your storage class. Life cycle is when you mention that, okay, for 5 days I'll keep that in standard, then for later 3 months I'll keep it in one zone, and after that I'll probably delete it, or I'll probably send it to S3 Glacier storage. Security and encryption, you can encrypt your data with different levels of encryptions. You have AWS provided encryption, you have client provided encryption. It's called, you know, KMAs, and different names are there. You can version it. So if you are saving your files multiple times, all the versions of your file will be saved exactly as you do in your code repository. And you can define access related permissions for each of your file. It is that granular. So if I want to access a file inside a folder, only that file's access will be given to me, and the rest of the files will be given to probably to someone else, probably Mr. X, and not to me. So I can only see one file inside a folder. Billing is based on all these things: how much storage you are doing, the network latency, the number of requests coming in, the which tier you have put it in, um, the transfer rate, the replication, all that. Okay. This is the last one, and then it will be done. Before that, yes, let me see if you have any question.
Yeah, one thing, like the available zones, as you mentioned. So at one time, one would be my primary zone and another will be my slave zone, right? And the replication of data in between those two zones, that is also manageable by us only. Means how that is managed, I mean.
Okay, so I don't remember if necessarily there is a master slave kind of a zone pattern, but you can
Okay.
have your data in multiple zones, availability zones. Okay, that for sure you can do, and either you do it manually, or the life cycle that I talked about. There is a, you will get to see a application, okay, a screen where you can mention that for 5 days I want to keep my data in this zone maybe, and then for next 3 months I want to send it to some other zone, okay, which can be in a, which can be a bit cheaper, because zone wise also services billing varies.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, does that clear it?
So I mean, it's through an application. Some I'm means inserting some data into a database. Uh, at the same time, the data will be available in both these zones. You mean to say, or
This is not your data. This is not your क्या बोलते हैं उसको? RDBMS. This is not your
yeah,
relational data. This is your
right.
flat file. This is your object. Yes, you can do that. What we are mentioning, you can access it from different zones. You can do your replication, and for your information, it does the replication in the background. So what happens if you are keeping your data in just one zone, okay, and something happened, your data will be replicated at the background and you will again get it. That is why I told it's 99.99% available and 99.999999% durable. It
Okay.
is
So
not
that,
a, yeah, tell me.
so the replication, it is happening in the background. At means always it is happening in the
Yes,
background.
yes. But you will put it in different availability zones for availability and
Right.
not
Right.
for data loss. Data loss is taken care by AWS.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Got it.
Because
One
S3 is
question.
a, yes, yes, I'll just give me one second.
Yeah, sure.
S3 is a serverless offering of Amazon. What does
Okay.
serverless mean? Serverless is where you do not have to manage your infrastructure. I just talked
Okay.
about EC2, where you have to manage your infrastructure. You have to take care of your operating system. You have to take care of your, rather operating system is given most of the time in EC2, but you have to install Java. You have to install some database. You have to run some command. Here, you're not doing anything, right? You're just saving the data, and AWS will take care of it, which
Okay.
means that at background, it is taking a care of the availability, durability, manageability, and everything else.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Tell me.
Thanks.
Who had some question?
Yeah. So regarding the security and encryption of S3, so does this get governed with whatever user roles policies or group roles policies are there, or do we have to define it separately for flat objects that we are storing?
See, the scope is big, what you asked. You can
Okay.
give your user the access to S3. Okay, one use case. You can give your group access to S3. You can give you can give access to S3 to some other service. You can tell your application that go and write some data in S3. I give you access.
Okay.
Cool. At the same time, whatever data you are saving inside S3, that can also have granular level of access. So
Okay.
as I mentioned,
So
if
so
I
as to
save two
access
files,
those files.
yes, just to access that
Okay.
file.
Okay. Okay.
So multiple layers and levels of security, or
Okay.
rather access and authentication and authorization.
So this will be governed by some different logic.
Yes. No,
Okay.
not any logic, but whatever you configure, you just have to
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Any more question? Okay. Okay. Serverless. This is the topic I just explained. I was talking about while explaining S3. Sorry. It is unlike EC2 where you have to manage the underlying infrastructure. Obviously, not till the ways. It's more like EC2 is more like a platform as a service, whereas serverless is also kind of platform as a service, but in my mind, it's more like a more like a software kind of a service. Though from definition, I'm wrong, but from my own understanding and definition, it's kind of like that. Now let me explain. Here you don't have to manage your servers. The runtime is given to you. It's more like a software, sorry, a computer is given to you with Java installed. You just have to run your Java. Okay. However, for S3 API Gateway DynamoDB, the concept can be a bit different because in S3 you're not really running any, you don't have to code anything, right? You just saving your data. So for S3, it's more like a software like a service. You are getting that platform and you are just saving your data there. But when it comes to Lambda, there you need to write your code and you have to deploy in this service. Here you do not need to take care of your Tomcat, you do not need to take care of your WebSphere, your CPU problem, your memory, how much memory you need, your hard disk, your network kind of a configuration, all that. Everything is given to you. It will never go down. If more requests coming, it will automatically scale up. It will automatically scale down. These are the features of serverless. And that is why it is extremely important for microservices kind of a architecture, where the developers are eventually moving towards microservices. They don't want to take care of a lot of things. They only want to concentrate on a very small domain driven services. They will just write that service, deploy in Lambda, and they are done. Is the concept clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, then if you go to, I mean, if I mean, say, suppose you are, I mean, what do you need to actually purchase in this case? I mean, what exactly you need to get from AWS? I mean, you don't have a VM, you don't have, I mean, anything. I mean,
Yes.
what exactly then you do? I mean, what you actually buy over here? I mean, in this
So
case.
you go in Lambda. Okay. Obviously, you have some console. You do see that screen where you're using Lambda. Okay. You deploy your code. You have this functionality. You can upload your code or you can write your code. Suppose you're writing a REST API using Python. Okay. You deployed your code. you are not doing anything. No request so far came in. You made it, you made it public. It is available. Public as in it is available to call, to get called. It is under some API gateway and it is available. Someone called it for the first time, then you are billed for how much
Okay.
duration it is running.
I mean, it is on the processing capacity. I
Exactly.
mean, how much processor is, I mean, used, right?
Don't go for
Based on that.
processor. That can complicate your question or your
I
answer.
mean, then only,
How much it
I
is
mean,
getting used. Only think that.
okay,
It is
based
not,
on, I mean, hits.
you may need some storage also. You may need some
Okay.
blah blah things also, right?
Okay.
So just
Okay.
think how much the underlying infrastructure is being used. Only for that much you are billed. So the service is called, it served, it gave you your result back. It took 2 minutes. You are billed for 2 minutes. Let your code be there for eternity, and you will never be billed unless it is called.
Until it is okay. I mean, if no requests are coming to your to my application, I mean, I won't be charged. I mean, if it is, I mean, if there are multiple hits, then I will be charged based on that.
Yes.
I mean, they will be. I mean, for the storage, they won't charge me. I mean, storing my code.
No, no. Unlike EC2,
No.
you provision
Okay.
EC2, you start the instance, your billing starts.
I mean, my code, will it not hold any data in this case? I mean, will it not hold any data?
No,
Say
no,
suppose it holds. Okay. Okay.
no. It is not
It's kind
supposed
of
to
a
hold
function.
any data.
I mean,
It's a
it is
function.
it's a kind of function. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some functionality used somewhere. Okay.
Yes. And
Okay.
I also got an opportunity to learn other cloud services like Oracle, Alibaba, Azure, Google Cloud. The the similar kind of so let me tell you that all the services that AWS is providing, more or less it is also there in all those cloud services, cloud providers. Okay. And they
Yeah.
have a different essence of it. Like in Oracle, you have was it for Oracle or Alibaba? 100 and sorry, first 200 minutes or first 200 requests, I don't exactly remember, are free per day.
Okay.
So it's a, if it's a
For serverless. For serverless
for
computing.
serverless,
Okay.
for serverless. It's called Lambda here, but it's called function in majority of the other.
Function. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
think of a small company where probably the requests are not, more than 200 or something. Maybe that's not right, but I'm just guessing. They are not at all billed for their services getting called. So this is extremely
Okay.
cool. I find it very, fascinating, this service.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I kind of, not paying for idle server. It's extremely fast. Automatic scaling. Here, there is a very small thing. When you're think that you are replicating your server, your Lambda, you have that functionality. There it kind of takes some time. There's a possibility that you will get some downtime because you have to copy that entire, underlying infrastructure and runtime and everything along with the code. Hence, I have seen that it has a very small downtime. That's also like 30 seconds or something, or 10 seconds. I don't remember exactly. But that's one a very, very small, the cloud haters would say it's a bad thing. But yes, it is there. Okay. I think I'm done with Lambda and I'm kind of done with it. I'll probably touch base on a couple of more things. It's about the CLI and the SDK and what are the other different ways you can actually access AWS. AWS is API based completely and those APIs are exposed. Generally, you do not really go into console and create your stuff because we are entering into an automation era or we have already entered into that. Hence, you write your programs, you write scripts, and you call those APIs, and you configure your application services. You create them on the fly rather than going into AWS console. Console, when I say console, it means that the AWS screen, the website they provide. Okay. CLI is more like a command line tool you just install, and AWS has some plugins. Those plugins will be installed in your machine. You write AWS in your command prompt and it will understand it. It is more like Git or some other software that we have, or Maven MV, and you write and it works. You can call those services. You can say AWS EC2 something something. I don't even remember any of those commands, and it will do the exact same thing that you go and do on the screen or website. SDK is there. Those things will basically help you if you have written some program, maybe for maybe in Go, and you are running that program on top of your SDK. SDK you will understand because it has those client supports, library supports internally. It understands your language and it will convert it into a REST API over HTTP or HTTPS protocol. Those APIs will be called and your service will be served. Your work will be done. Okay, I think here I'll kind of rest my case. I'm done. Now let's discuss if you have any question, any suggestion.
Supradeep, it was really an informative session actually, and we would really like to see whatever you have just said, how to like use the web console and the CLI, and how to
Okay.
create those instances, and the load balancing cases, and then the CloudWatch, how it is happening, the auto scaling, everything, right? So can we have a different session on this? Maybe next week whenever you are free, right? So can we have a session just on this? Like you will be just giving us some demo of how it is happening. No, like directly the web console and the CLI part. So can we have that?
Yes, we can think of it. Definitely.
Okay. Okay.
No questions from my side, Supradeep.
Okay.
Thank you so much for this session, because I'm really new to AWS and all the cloud services. So it was like very informational. Thank you so much for it.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
I'm glad it
Supradeep,
helped.
same from my side. Yeah, I mean, it was very good.
Awesome.
I mean, I could actually relate to, because I was also going through Azure, so I could relate to many of the terms and all. Yeah.
Cool. I'm glad it helped.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it will anyways create a base for us to start. Not started yet.
Great.
Thank you so much, Pradeep.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Supradeep.
You're welcome. Okay, guys. Thank you then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If nothing else, then I'll just stop in this session.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Okay.
much,
Bye.
guys.
Supradeep, one question. Can we have this presentation or a recording maybe?
Okay. Yes,
Just in case we want to go through
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I mean, if you can share, yes, it would be good.
Yeah.
Okay. I will stop my recording and okay.